Welcome to our fifth study into our Holy Week series. I'm continuing to read from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 20, and this story comes immediately after Jesus' authority has been questioned by the chief priests and the scribes, who asked him, "Whose authority are you doing these things under?" as we studied yesterday. And immediately after that incident, Jesus replies with the parable of the vineyard owner. Now, the vineyard in Scripture represents God's relationship with Israel, and through Israel, as we know from his promises to Abraham, the whole world would be blessed. This story is repeated in both Matthew and Mark and Luke. I'm reading it from the Gospel of Luke, but there are a number of sentences that are repeated that show us that Jesus knew exactly the hearts of those people that were listening to him. Often in the scriptures, in the New Testament, it says Jesus knew their minds or knew what they were thinking. And this story shows that he knew what they were thinking, what those chief priests were thinking. Then he began to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard and leased it to tenant farmers and went on a journey for a long time to another country. At harvest time, he sent a servant as his representative to the tenants so that they would give him his share of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat the servant and sent him away empty-handed. So he again sent another servant. They also beat him and dishonoured and treated him disgracefully and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent yet a third, and this one too they wounded and threw out of the vineyard. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will have respect for him." But when the tenants saw him, they discussed it amongst themselves, saying, "This man is the heir. Let us kill him so that the inheritance will be ours." So they threw the son out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and he will put these servants to death, and he will give the vineyard to others. When the chief priests, the scribes and the elders heard this, they said, "May it never be." I believe Jesus spoke straight into their hearts with this parable. And the reason I believe this is that in the story, the tenants recognise the heir. This man is the heir. Jesus is letting them know that he knows that they know who he is. They know he's the Son of God. They know that he is the Messiah. So you might be wondering, well, why on earth, if they had been waiting for the Messiah all this time, would they want to kill him when they found him? And it's a good question. The people of Israel at that time were scattered in the nations from the Babylonian exile, and it was just the people of Judah left in Jerusalem and the surrounding territory. And they perhaps were expecting a Messiah who would restore Israel, who would lift them out of bondage from the Romans, and who was like an earthly king, a king that they were expecting, who would solve their problems for them and give them some nice pats on the back and medals for the good job that they had done in the intervening period. But Jesus doesn't come as that kind of Messiah. And so they hate him. And they've discussed it amongst themselves, and they have been seeking to kill him. It says in all of the Gospels they were seeking to kill him. And in both Matthew and Mark and Luke, in this story, when the tenant workers see the son, they say this man is the heir. So Jesus is making it very clear that he knows they recognise him as the Messiah. This is not something that's generally taught, and I understand that. And perhaps you disagree with me, and that's fine. I think that debating our own understanding and revelation of the scriptures is really important. So one way that we can kind of understand the scriptures when we find them difficult like this is to look for parallels in other stories. And so I'm just going to share with you an understanding from the story of King David. David was the anointed king, we know that. And after many years, he actually gained the whole kingdom. But not long afterwards, his son, Absalom, sought to usurp that kingdom and take it for himself. And David had many friends, but one of his dearest friends was a guy called Ahithophel. I'm always worried when I say that I'll pronounce it wrong. But Ahithophel was one of his counsellors and close friends. And Ahithophel betrayed David and actually went to the other side and joined in Absalom's conspiracy against his father. And it's a long story. It starts in 2 Samuel chapter 15. It carries on for a few chapters. And it doesn't come to any good for Absalom or Ahithophel in the end. So I'm reading from 2 Samuel chapter 17, and I'll just read one verse. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out and went to his home, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself. I don't think I'm giving too much away by drawing a parallel between Ahithophel and David and Absalom with Judas and Jesus and the chief priests and the Pharisees. There's actually more parallels in that story than I've shared with you today, and you can read that for yourself and maybe try to understand that. But David was the anointed king, and his friend Ahithophel betrayed him. And when that plot failed, Ahithophel went and hung himself. And we know that when Judas and his plot with the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees failed, he went and hung himself. He realised what he'd done. You see, I believe that Judas wanted Jesus to be forced into proving that he was the Messiah and overthrowing the Roman governor at that time. And that's what the chief priests wanted from Messiah too. They didn't want a Messiah who came to save the world and lift them out of the bondage of sin. They were expecting a Messiah who would just lift them out of the bondage of the Romans and make the Jews have authority over the rest of the world. That's what they were looking for. And when Jesus preached another gospel, the full gospel of the kingdom, they hated him. And they tried to work together a plot to kill him. So like I said, whether you agree with my understanding of that story or not, it's clear that it's quite possible to see Jesus differently from how he is truly representing himself, and to have a different desire for his plan, something that suits us and what we expect God to do in this situation. But Jesus had a completely different perspective on this. He had already told them that he must suffer and die. He knew where he was going. He knew what God's plan was. And he also knew that unwittingly, the chief priests and the Pharisees would work themselves into that plan by killing him. So, as a finish, all I'd want to encourage you to do is to really seek Jesus, seek his kingdom, and ask him Lord, is there any area in my life where I've got a wrong perspective of you? Show me who you really are. Show me what your plan is for me and for the whole world, so that I can walk in accordance with your will. Because that's surely what all of us want, to walk with him in the spotlight of his will. Thanks for watching.